Imagine it's 1998. You're in high school, it's a Christian school, and you're gay. That was the experience for Brisbane comedian Ryan Goodwin, who believed he was evil and prayed to be normal. Ashwin Segkar here for Help Me, I'm a Comedian. Psychologist Rachel Hannam is with me, as always, to unpack the dark backstory that drives our comedian guest. Ryan, did that belief that you were evil come from the people around you, or was it a conclusion that you came to on your own?
I think it came from society, right? Back in 1998, I remember that the only representation of anyone queer was someone who was incredibly effeminate and flamboyant, and I just didn't know anyone who was gay. I had no representation of it. I was highly religious, although my parents were not. It was something that I had chosen, and I had chosen that school. But through the teachings of God and Christianity, through my teachers who had said some negative things about homosexuals, and also the media and TV, the whole society told me that I was evil. And it's so weird to think about that now because I am so far beyond that.
Can you talk about, for you, what the impact of that was, all those negative images and stereotyping that you were getting back at that time?
I remember crying myself to sleep at night. I remember having intense dreams where I was possessed by the devil and demons. I remember praying to God to stop. I remember having those paralysis dreams where a demon is holding you down. But because I was so evil, because I was gay, I really didn't want to shout out Jesus' name, which was always what would really let that demon go and I could wake up. I wasn't worthy of this Jesus or God to save me. Can
you tell us more about praying to be normal?
It was so long ago. I can't remember. I remember crying, and I remember asking God all the time to just please. I remember trying not to think about guys. I dated so many awkward girls back then, just trying to like them.
At that time in the mid-90s, I had a lot of close Christian friends, and there would be some Christian preachers that would come around and try to offer conversion therapy and talk about how they used to be gay, but they're not anymore because they prayed to Jesus. Did you get that kind of experience with pastors trying to convert you?
No, because it was just the biggest secret in the world. And if I let this secret go, it would just destroy everything. I remember being outside a classroom about to walk in, and for some reason this came up, and it wasn't directed at me at all. I think I was really good at hiding the fact that I was gay. And a teacher, I remember her, she told the students that gay people are really sick individuals and they do belong in mental institutions.
That's what the teacher said?
That's what the teacher said. I was in grade 9 at the time.
What impact did that have on you hearing that?
Again, I think it just reinforced what society was telling me and what my religion was telling me, and that was I was evil and sick.
That must have been pretty overwhelming, Ryan. You must have felt pretty helpless or powerless at times.
Yes. And the thing is what this did to me is I tried to balance out the evilness by just being the best person. Teachers loved me. If I saw an old person crossing the road, I would go and help them cross the road. If I saw a litter, I would pick up the litter. I was just doing all these things to try and counterbalance the fact that I was evil. What this did, though, was when people liked me, it made me even more evil because I was making them accept evil. And then I just try and counteract that even more by being an even better person.
Did you have a bit of imposter syndrome, thinking I'm making people think that I'm someone I'm not? It sounds like maybe it was even deeper, like it was deep shame.
Yeah.
You couldn't accept people's genuine care.
I think I was just, every conversation I had with people, I was just monitoring what I said, my intonations. All these kids back in the late 90s paid out everyone about being gay, right? But for me, I had to hide it so much more.
It makes you hypervigilant, do you know what I mean? Like always on the lookout for attack, criticism, rejection, anything
it's
like that.
like every conversation that I was dodging about being a homosexual or gay or people calling me gay, I was like, did I get away with that?
That's hypervigilance.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah. Probably it's actually carried over into my adult life.
Yeah.
So I'm just hyper aware of everyone's feelings, what everyone's thinking, everyone's intonations. And yeah, probably led to depression in my early 30s just because I couldn't be around people. I couldn't go to parties. I just started to shut down my social life because it just became so exhausting.
Those old survival habits die hard.
Yes.
But they kept you safe in a way at the time.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know what else to do. That was the best thing that you could find.
I was still relying on God to change me.
Yeah.
Up until I was 16. I put everything in that basket. He is all-seeing, all-knowing, the most powerful being in the universe. Surely he would not have made me gay.
We're going to come back to your coping tactics in just a minute, but for anyone out there who might be listening, who might also have that perception that they're evil because of their religious faith, can you tell us a little bit more about what that feels like to feel evil?
It felt world-ending.
Fear of annihilation.
Yeah. I remember almost committing suicide, but it wasn't emotional. Like I don't know if I was just toying with the idea because I was a teenager and that's something that teenagers do. I've never actually spoken to people about this, but I remember being there just thinking that I had to do this to stop the evil.
It's a very dark place to be. There mustn't have been much light coming through that dark box.
I think darkness is a great description of how I felt.
Yeah.
There was no light. And the only light there was this God, or in the books, or reading about God, or talking to God. He was the light.
I wonder if I could offer a psychological frame around the word evil. Psychologists don't tend to use the word evil. We leave that for the priests. But we do talk about shame, because shame is a fear of disconnection, being unacceptable, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of being kicked out of the tribe. Charles Darwin studied shame and said it kept children safe, this emotion, because it kept them with their tail between their legs, so to speak, and their head down. And it's a survival emotion from a social psychological perspective that makes you do one of the 4 survival mechanisms of fight or flight or freeze or fawn, which is one that a lot of people don't know about. Fawning is scrambling for people's approval, trying to fit in, trying to be good and nice and perfect and polite, and that's what you did. Yeah. If we see this as a survival mechanism, we can honour it, because anything that's trying to help us survive can't be bad. It just ends up coming at a cost and being ineffective in the long run. Does that resonate?
Yes. I don't think I've been able to get over that fawnness as an adult.
You still do a bit of fawning?
I'm a people pleaser to my core.
Yeah.
And I would love to find mechanisms to just be okay with being me. Even in the recent marriage debate, for 10 years, I feel like I moved past the evilness. And what I did try to do, though, is I just tried to make everyone love me. And that's how I convinced people that it was okay to be gay. I changed parents' minds. I changed so many people's minds just by being lovable. But that feels like this massive defense mechanism now. And it's really hard for me to disagree with people or to have my own point of view, because I constantly find that even in the past when I've had moments where I've been threatened to be bashed. It's someone that has loved or cared for me who has stood up and protected me. So it's this protection mechanism that I've got. And I find it very hard to let that go.
It sounds like there's nothing unusual about that. We all love to be loved and we all want to be liked. Me too. But I think it's degrees of reliance. It sounds like what you're saying is you're overly reliant on other people liking you to have a sense of self-esteem, and perhaps you'd like to just be a bit less dependent on other people's approval.
Yes,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Can you share some tactics of how we can do that, Rachel? What do you do with people who are overly people-pleasing?
I do a few different things. I mean, one is to become really aware of of the automatic thoughts that come into our head when we meet with some disapproval or some disagreement from somebody in our lives. Because the automatic thoughts are sometimes like, oh no, I must be wrong. Oh, now I have to apologise. Now I have to make it right. So just becoming super aware of that narrative that goes on in your head in response to people disapproving of you in some way. And you can work at that level. You can tell yourself, it's okay if we disagree. I don't have to, I don't need to say sorry if I'm not wrong, if I haven't done anything wrong. And there's a whole lot of ways we can reframe our self-talk so that we can start to give ourselves the message that, it's safe, we're still safe, even if there's conflict or disagreement. Because when we're a small child, conflict and disapproval feel extremely threatening because we are literally so dependent on the adults for our survival. But in adulthood, we need to learn that we're okay. If people reject us or criticise us, that's probably saying a lot more about them than it is about us. So there's ways we can change our cognitions and talk to ourselves differently so that we can start to be a bit more okay with disapproval and conflict. But probably the most important thing is to be able to learn to tolerate feeling uncomfortable, because people's disapproval makes you feel very anxious and very uncomfortable. And that's what you're running away from. You're running away from the feeling that it triggers inside of you. So if you get better at tolerating discomfort, increase your capacity to feel the vulnerability and the shakiness of meeting someone else's, criticism or disapproval, and bring your nervous system back to relative calm, then you can think more clearly, and then you're able to switch into another mode, which is more the adult mode rather than the defensive child mode or the people-pleasing child mode. So, there's quite a bit of work to be done here on this, and I really relate to that people-pleasing, approval-seeking schema that you described. But yeah, there's definitely hope here. You can definitely rewrite some of these old scripts.
Can I ask you about one other element? One of the big 5 personality traits is agreeableness. Are some people more naturally agreeable than others, and what can they do about that?
Accept themselves as they are. Because the more you love and accept yourself as you are, with all your flaws and all your liabilities and all your strengths as a human being, the more you will be able to buffer against other people's disapproval and become a bit less reliant on it. I don't think it's good to go the other way either, though, and become highly disagreeable and think, I don't need anybody, I don't care what people think. That's just a rebellion against the other thing. I just think we want to decrease our dependence on other people always liking us, because that just gets us into trouble.
I'm Ashwin Segkar here with psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam and comedian Ryan Goodwin on Help Me I'm a Comedian. Ryan, at one point in school you did a bit of a bit in English class for your teacher. Can you tell us more about that?
In grade 8, people were starting to realise I was a little different, right? And I was starting to get picked on, and I remember hating high school at that point. And then my first, experience with improvisation is the teacher got me up to do, I think it was just a 1-minute speech about a pencil. And I had to make it up on the spot. And it killed. Like, the whole audience laughed and cheered. And I remember being in the playground after that. And someone came to pick on me from a different class. And then one of the cool kids was like, hey, don't do that. Ryan is cool. And I remember going, oh, great. Excellent. This is what I do. And for high school, for the entirety of the rest of my classes, it was like I'd do a show and then people would love me. And then I'd start to wane. I'd start to get picked on again. And then I'd do another show again. And then I'd be cool again. And then it'd be great. So I kind of feel like I combated this homophobia, or people calling that I was gay, behind this performance and entertaining people. And it just made entertaining really high stakes. But also, I'm quite proud of that too.
I imagine that's how it is for a lot of comedians earlier in their careers in adolescence. Would that be the case?
Yeah, just getting out of trouble as much as you can. I think so. I'm wondering how you made a pencil funny. Can you remember some of your pencil bits?
I can't. I can remember it was about a pencil. I think I even tried to sell people on the benefits of how wonderful a pencil is. Being dyslexic, I used to hate pens because they were so permanent and I couldn't change it. That a pencil was beautiful because you could erase the mistakes.
Ryan, I feel like I'm in the same boat as you, whereas I'm quite agreeable with people, don't like conflict very much. Have you been able to find a way to do what Rachel was saying earlier, to be okay with being uncomfortable and to just sit in that and wallow in it sometimes?
So it's interesting. When I got asked to do this show, which was a couple of weeks ago, naturally, being a perfectionist, I started working on myself and trying to do things. What Rachel demonstrated to me while watching her was that breath is a massive thing. So trying to feel uncomfortable and breathe through it. Recently, I'm a geek. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I had a moment with my group on Messenger where, I don't want to make this political, but something political was happening, and I've never done this with this group before, but I went on a massive rant. And it has to do with being a homosexual and how society perceives us. And after that, I kind of let that sit for like 5 or 10 minutes, because I was like, if they want to be my friend, this is what they have to deal with. They have to deal with the fact that I've gone through this, that I have this pain. It's okay for me to be angry. When all other times, if I'm angry, like, I'll just be like, oh, I'm so sorry I was angry. Because being likable was so much more important. I still was the first person to respond, and I made a joke about it, and then everyone kind of agreed with me, which I'm like, ugh. But I was so close. I was so close to being okay with the fact that, no, I'm angry, and now this is on you guys. You guys can deal with my anger. That sounds like progress.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people who've got a track record of people-pleasing and fawning, it's quite a revelation when they realise they're allowed to feel anger, that they don't have to turn their anger into anxiety and self-doubt, because so often for people-pleasing types and agreeable types, the automatic reflexive reaction is, what's wrong with me? Yes. Automatic self-doubt. And to actually get more mature and clearer on, actually, it's not always me. And I'm allowed to feel angry sometimes. And anger's healthy, and it maybe helps me reestablish boundaries that are important to me. And this is quite a revelation to all my clients who have these people-pleasing tendencies.
What role did your family play in all this time?
Well, as a teenager, my dad left when I was 13, so he wasn't a big influence while I was going through this period. My mother was wonderful and beautiful and loving, but I didn't come out to her until I was 19, and my sister was also away. So I spent most of my time dealing with this by myself. I grew up in a small country town, so that was probably good for me then, because I was isolated, I was away from people, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, I spent a lot of time by myself. My mother was so wonderful when I came out to her. The first words out of her mouth were, "I love you," which I'm so grateful that I was able to have that experience. My dad did the same thing. First words out of his mouth were, "I love you." So I feel quite lucky that I was met with that support. And I just really feel for my community who were not, because it's so hard to go through that, not to have that support. I can't imagine what it would be like for those people.
Our shame starts to melt away when we're received with understanding and empathy and acceptance.
Can you tell us about finding a community, how you went about that and what the impact of that was?
Oh, man. I remember the first time I walked into a gay nightclub. I remember just walking up the stairs, and there was probably something like the Grease Megamix playing in the background or something like that, and just walking in, and for the first time just seeing what other gay people looked like. And the fact
you mean
that
just like normal people?
Well, they looked exactly like me. To see boys holding hands was just like, oh my God. Like, I remember just dancing and just feeling like I belonged for the first time in my life.
Good feeling.
Oh, yeah. It was just so much relief. I'd spent my life not knowing who I was or seeing anyone like me, and thinking that I was wrong. So dancing in that nightclub and seeing guys my age just be normal was just this relief. And I would love to say that at that point of time I realised that I was normal and everything was fine, and everything like that. I still think I had a lot of work to do, particularly outside of the nightclub. But being in that nightclub was a haven.
It's really important that we get clear, I think especially for young people, on the difference between fitting in and true belonging. Because in fitting in, you seek to be some version of yourself that's not authentic. In fitting in, you're trying to garner people's approval and love. In fitting in, you're distorting yourself in some way and repressing your feelings in order to be liked. But in true belonging, who you are, how you are, your differences and similarities, all of that is respected and is accepted.
Ryan, do you think what Rachel was saying, the fact that you do belong now, you do have a community, can that make it easier to not have to please everyone?
It does help, but I don't feel like I'm fully there, because I might be accepted by my queer community, but am I accepted by the greater community? You know, not too long ago I was on a bus and I pecked my partner and a lady had a go at me on the bus. You know, I was lucky that the whole bus kind of turned against her, you know, and she was like, you shouldn't be doing that. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but I think I'm allowed to peck my boyfriend. And she's like, I think the bus driver's going to ask you to leave the bus. And then the couple behind me spoke up and said, we were just kissing and it's not a problem. And the whole bus started to turn against her. And I kind of asked the bus to not, because it's not helping. And she asked me to get off the bus. And I said, sorry, I'm not going to get off the bus.
This is in 2020?
This is in 2019.
Last year.
She then got off the bus at the next stop, and then the bus continued on. I was grateful for the fact that the people on the bus stood up for me. But I still have that experience within my community, and it's less. The marriage vote was majorly in our favour, yet I still feel like I'm fighting to belong in my community, and I'm tired. And I just want to rest. I just want to be me, and I want to be okay with being me.
I feel something similar with being a racial minority. Most of the people are okay with you all the time, but that one racist that says something on the bus or on the bridge, that's what you remember for 6 or 7 years. It's just this amplification of the one psychopath or outlier. You just really blow up what they're thinking. And this makes me think, Rachel, maybe you can comment on that concept, the way we overplay the worst elements of society. It's not enough to belong in a minority, is it? You want to belong to the majority.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's fantastic that social change, political activism, these sort of high-level societal movements have created change, and policies and politics have created necessary changes. The structural power has changed. And I'm not going to be unrealistic here. You know, I just don't envisage a utopia either. And it reminds me, every time I hear this topic come up, it makes me think of a Buddhist parable of the emperor who asked his servants to cover his entire kingdom in soft leather because he wanted to be able to walk anywhere and have it not hurt. And the head monk came to the king and the emperor and said, I could just make you a pair of really nice shoes and then you can walk wherever you like. And it's a great metaphor, I think. We can try and cover the whole world to make it safe and not ouchy, but we'll never be able to do that. There will always be threats to our psychological safety. Or if it's not homophobia or racism, it'll be something else. There's always going to be people out there ready to put us down. We need to go on an inner journey of self-love and self-acceptance and self-compassion. That's like making the shoes, you know, and then when you've got more of that, you can go anywhere, and it still doesn't feel good if a thorn pierces the sole of your shoe from time to time, but it's going to be a lot easier than trying to cover the kingdom in leather.
I love that story.
Me
That's
too.
Great.
Psychological leather shoes.
Yeah.
I like that concept. What role does improvisation play in your life at the moment?
It has taught me a lot about failing, that it's okay to fail. Before I was doing improvisational comedy, I was shutting down my life. When I was meeting up with people, I was having like 10 conversations backed up in my head because I was responsible for everyone that I would meet. I would have to make sure that everyone that I meet, that, I was lovable and they wanted to be around me. Impro kind of taught me that a scene, when you jump onto stage and you jump on with your partner, it's actually both of your responsibilities. And that's been an amazing transformation, be able to realize, great, a conversation is not just my responsibility. It's actually the responsibility of the other person as well. And if we're not having a good time, that's on both of us. That's not just on me. So I've been able to recognize those conversations and be like, okay, I think I'm done. And then be like, hey, great talking to you. I'm just going to go and speak to this person over here. Have a good night. It's taught me that failing is okay because I do it so often. Every single night I will do one scene which will just be terrible. But because I do it so often, it's kind of like, all right, cool. There was that really bad scene. And I have so many other good scenes that I'm like, all right, cool. Like, this is fine. So impro has kind of taught me really about listening and about acceptance and about just relationships with other people. You're not going to have a good scene with everyone,
My experience with impro is it helps you be in the moment and gets you out of your head.
Yeah.
You have to be so present. Fear and shame and anxiety and depression are very self-focused emotions in some ways because we're worried about ourselves. But I think when we can step out, we can attend to ourselves, but I think you're right. In the moment, if we're interacting with another person, I think what you're saying is if you look at them, tune into them, some other intelligence or intuition will come to the surface and you'll just be in flow. You'll just be responding in the best way you possibly can instead of being stuck up in your head, worried about, all self-conscious and worried about what everyone's thinking of you.
The one thing I would love to do in my future is to be less in my head.
Yeah. Well, I think you can join a very large club. That's everybody listening.
That's right. And one of the things you're doing to get out of your head is meditation. Can you tell us about what you do and what impact that has had?
I read a book which is 10% Happier, and this was at the most depressing...
Dan Harris?
Dan Harris. And I, being dyslexic, I never read. And so listening to that book for the first time, I discovered about inner monologues. All the way up until I was 32, I had no idea that this creature, this inner monologue that constantly put you down existed because it's only ever spoken about in books and it was hardly ever spoken about through the media that I watched or listened to.
It's like being a fish in the ocean going, what water? And then you realise there's water.
100%. And I discovered this thing and I listened to his book and he was like, you can be 10% happier. And I was like, I can aim for that. And he gave me just a technique about breath meditation, which was just, focus on 4 breaths in and then restart over again. And the idea is just to stop the insane amount of thoughts that are going through your head. And yeah, when I first started, it's like my head was pounding and I couldn't even get 2 breaths. And now it's like if I get frustrated or angry, or even if I'm on stage, I can just take a couple of breaths and I can just completely calm my mind down and I can just be present to the moment. And it's an insanely powerful tool.
And it takes practice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It took me a while to be able to achieve that. And even now I still kind of let that relax and go, but it's kind of about forgiving yourself or in moments when you start to be stressed in life. It's just amazing what just focusing on your breath can be, I like to think of it like every breath you have is completely different. The air that you breathe is always different. The pace of your breath is always different. You're literally breaking down your life to the smallest possible moment. And just experiencing that is so powerful.
I agree. I think the breath is the best way for us to self-regulate.
I like that. There's an ancient quote, you can't step into the same stream twice. You can't step into the same airflow twice. It's always new.
Yeah.
Ashwin Segkar and Rachel Hannam with you on ABC Radio. Ryan and Rachel, thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Ashwin.
Thank you for having me.
On ABC Radio, this was Help Me, I'm a Comedian. If the conversation today has made you want to talk to someone, Lifeline provides 24-hour crisis counselling. Their number is 13 11 14, or you can find other resources at beyondblue.org.au. Alternatively, you can speak to your GP now and arrange Medicare-supported sessions with a psychologist. You can find this and all of our other interviews on the ABC Radio website, abc.net.au/radio/programs/editor's choice. I'm Ashwin Segkar. See you next week.